As a FromSoftware fan, it kinda pains me to say it, but Lies of P did some things better than the FromSoftware games. Now I'm not saying it has topped all their games, but man, some gameplay and storytelling mechanics it utilizes are so damn cool that I kinda think the Soulsborne games and even Elden Ring could benefit from implementing them. But let's not forget, Lies of P is the kind of game that if you didn't know who made the game, you would probably assume it's made by FromSoft. And it does at times make you think, is Round 8 Studios just straight up copying the FromSoft games, or are they trying to show how much they love FromSoft games? Personally, I think that overall it's really just admiration towards a type of style and standard in gaming, but I gotta admit, sometimes it really does feel like it's copying these games. And you know, this does have its problems because the negatives do tend to stand out when you mirror a game so much, but overall, this game is awesome and I absolutely love it. Now, there were a lot of great but also simple quality of life improvements that I'm surprised FromSoft hasn't used, but out of all of it, I found three main things that really stood out in Lies of P that I subconsciously have been wishing the FromSoft games would add for years. And with that said, there will be spoilers for Lies of P and a little bit for the other Soulsborne games, including Elden Ring, so right now is your chance to click away. After reading that title, something might have came to mind, but I'm not talking about your P organ, I'm talking about the pulse cell regain mechanic. So if you don't know what this regain mechanic is, essentially it's this unique situation in Lies of P where if you run out of pulse cells, the item that heals your health, during a long-winded fight, you have the ability to earn one pulse cell back once you've landed enough attacks, but also you need to avoid getting hit or you will die before this happens. To put it simply, you earn this pulse cell back because you are skilled enough to do so. For me, this brought about a feeling I never really experienced in the FromSoft games, and that feeling was hope. Now, this isn't to say I felt hopeless when playing Dark Souls or Elden Ring, but I can wholeheartedly say that across every single one of these games, at some point during a difficult run or fight, if I went through too many Estus Flasks too soon, in my mind I'd be saying, damn, there's no fucking way I'm gonna be able to do this. This might even seem crazy to some of you, but sometimes I would literally jump off a cliff or purposely let the boss finish me off just so I could reset the fight sooner because I already went through all of my healing faster than my previous attempts. As you can see, it's kind of a hopeless mindset. So, Lies of P fixed this issue I never even thought needed to be fixed. There were definitely some times where I felt out of my depth, but then I would see I nearly have another pulse cell which would motivate me to lock in and try my best because I felt like I had a chance of winning. And after experiencing this mechanic, it kinda made me realize that frustratingly hard bosses like Melania, the Goldskin Duo, Midir, Sword Saint Isshin, and more could have been more fun and tolerable. The way I see it is this mechanic allowed me to improve as the fight went on as opposed to getting better after each attempt, and I won't lie, a solid chunk of these boss fights literally came down to this mechanic and it felt fucking awesome. There's three things that really bother me about questing in FromSoft games. One is that I unintentionally miss so many side quests, two is I also get paranoid about missing these side quests, and three is there's not enough of these. In all seriousness though, if you don't know what these first 2 points mean, picture this. You're playing any of the FromSoft titles and at some point you've probably found a really cool NPC who has asked you to do something and you want to help but you have no idea who, where and what the fuck they are talking about. Then you are forced to go online and look up a walkthrough for this NPC, and sometimes you find out you missed their storyline because you fought one too many bosses or rested at one too many bonfires. Now, this might just be my personal preference, but I already think it's an issue that the only way to progress a quest is to unimmerse yourself from the game and look it up online. But once you know how quests progress in these games, you start to become paranoid about missing these quests because the only way to be sure is to go back to these NPCs after every boss fight, site of grace, bonfire, whatever you want to call it, because the game doesn't indicate the quest has progressed. Sound familiar? Well, Lies of P takes away all of this and it's honestly a fantastic feeling. To explain, sometimes in the game when the player opens up the Stargazer, which is this game's bonfire, and attempts to fast travel, these little symbols will appear from time to time. These images indicate, hey, it's time to revisit this NPC to progress their storyline. Essentially, you know where and when you need to go in order to progress the quest. After experiencing this mechanic, I can't express how bad FromSoft games need it, especially after playing their newest game, Elden Ring. Now, it's already a common thing for the older games to have NPCs that aren't easy to find, but the linear style of those games at least made it somewhat likely that you would. In Elden Ring, because it's an open world, some quests are literally impossible to do without a guide of some sort. Like, I bet there isn't one person out there who hasn't completed Millicent's quest without looking up a guide, and if there is, you're lying. But in all seriousness, if FromSoft keeps heading in this direction, I would honestly think it's crazy if they didn't consider this mechanic for future titles. I gotta say, these decisions right here always felt more meaningful in Lies of P than compared to when I had to make them in the FromSoft games. To put it simply, my P organ's attachment was tingling like never before. If you know, you know. Now, I'm not saying I didn't care about the choices I made in those games at all, but I gotta be honest, who they affected, what the outcome would be, and why I should care meant almost nothing unless I understood the lore, and that usually happened after I saw a lore video. If you're unsure what this means, in the FromSoft games, whenever these decisions had to be made, all you had to go off was a couple of lines of vague dialogue. There was never information about why your character should ever care about these consequences, and after you made the choice, you would get more vague dialogue and no feedback whatsoever. Actually, the only feedback you got was that NPC is now dead because you gave him the wrong answer. But before I get into that, I gotta start this off with acknowledging that Lies of P has a far more easier to understand story at face value than the FromSoft games. And because of this, the context of the decisions is easier to grasp. FromSoft games usually require deep diving into the story with lore, and I don't know if I would want this to change because I do love this side of their games. In Lies of P though, not only did I not need to look at lore videos, the choices I made in the game actually felt like they had an emotional weight added to them, and this was such a refreshing feeling. The way they did this was by adding a timer mechanic to the decisions, and also they gave the player feedback after the decision was made. So the timer mechanic I thought was awesome. Basically, if you didn't make the choice quick enough, the game would make it for you. What this did was add pressure to the decision because you wanted to make it yourself, but it also gave you a feeling that this was an important moment because, well, why put a timer on a pointless decision? Sometimes even the screen would look more hectic than normal, so this raised the pressure of that decision even more. Basically, as the game went on, you knew there was serious implications to these decisions. On top of that, after you made each choice, this message would pop up telling you that these decisions are affecting your character in some way. As you get towards the end of the game, you can clearly tell these decisions are all amounting to something, and you start to really care about how they're going to affect your own character, but you also care about how they're going to affect the other characters as well. So again, after experiencing this, I wish the FromSoft games made me care about the decisions like I did in Lies of P. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten to the end of any of those games and it turns out I'm destroying the world because of some random NPC I decided to agree with. If the opposite happened and I got the good ending, even if I was saving the world, it felt the exact same as ending the world because I wouldn't care. And with the end of the world comes the almost end of this video, but I just want to quickly say that even if the FromSoft games don't add these three things that I mentioned, those games are going to be forever awesome. Even if some things can still be improved upon. And there were more than what I just mentioned, I just chose the biggest ones that I thought would really make a difference, because there was more. And with Lies of P, well, I honestly hope the future titles stay this similar to the Soulsborne games, because that means I now have two companies that can give me the same level of enjoyment. And with that said, thank you so much for watching, look after yourself, and I hope this made you go, yeah!